More than 10,000 Russian soldiers have surrendered to Ukraine since Putin's invasion began. But here's the detail the headlines keep skipping. Hundreds of those surrenders happened with 0 Ukrainian troops present, no squad, no checkpoint, no soldier aiming a rifle, just a drone hovering silently overhead, and a Russian soldier deciding that machine was scarier than anything else on the battlefield. How does an unmanned aircraft force a trained combat soldier to lay down his weapon? And why, when those soldiers surrender, does their own government sentence them to 15 years in prison, the same punishment Russia hands out for murder? The answer reveals something deeply broken at the core of Putin's military, and something genuinely unprecedented about how Ukraine is fighting this war. Something historic is happening on Ukraine's front lines, and it has almost no precedent in the recorded history of modern warfare. Russian soldiers, armed, trained combat troops, are surrendering not to opposing infantry, not to overwhelming firepower. They're surrendering to drones, unmanned aircraft that hover overhead, watch, and wait. And when a soldier decides he's done, the drone guides him, step by step, to Ukrainian-controlled territory. Ukraine's defense minister, Mikhailo Fedorov, put hard numbers to this on March 7th in a public statement. During the winter months alone, more than 100 Russian soldiers laid down their weapons, specifically because of Ukrainian drone units. Fedorov called it an exchange fund, because every prisoner Ukraine takes is eventually a Ukrainian soldier coming home. Now, 100 might sound like a footnote in a war this size. It isn't. Here's why that number matters. In the entire history of 20th century warfare, from the trenches of World War I to the deserts of Iraq, surrenders at this scale almost never happened one-on-one. A soldier surrenders when he's surrounded, when his unit collapses, when there's a human force directly in front of him with a weapon aimed at his chest. A drone has no chest. It can't surround you, yet it's accomplishing something entire battalions used to require. According to analysis from the Institute for the Study of War, drones, both aerial and ground-based, now account for somewhere between 70 and 80% of all Russian casualties on active frontline segments. That statistic alone tells you what Russian soldiers know. When a drone has you in its sights, you are seconds from death. The calculus changes completely. This isn't soldiers giving up because they're tired. This is soldiers giving up because the machine watching them has an almost perfect kill record, and they've seen it happen to the men standing next to them. But there's a second reason this matters, and it goes directly to what Fedorov said about bringing defenders home. Section 2. The prisoner. Pipeline. Ukraine isn't just eliminating Russian forces, it's building leverage. Prisoner exchanges are one of the only semi-functional agreements still operating between Russia and Ukraine. And the math is brutal. You can only trade what you have. Every Russian soldier Ukraine captures alive is a Ukrainian soldier who might eventually come home. Just one day before Fedorov's statement, Al Jazeera confirmed a 2-day prisoner swap between the two sides, 500 soldiers each. That's 500 Ukrainians returning from Russian captivity in a single exchange. The value of that is hard to overstate. Russia has a documented record of torturing Ukrainian POWs. Getting them home fast matters enormously. Now, here's the strategic piece most analysts gloss over. Ukraine is using drones to manufacture prisoners at a lower cost and lower risk than any other method available. Traditional prisoner capture requires a Ukrainian soldier to physically be present. That means exposure. That means potential casualties. Drone capture keeps Ukraine's troops safe while still filling the exchange fund. It's a force multiplication that goes far beyond the battlefield kill count. On March 5th, data compiled by the Kyiv Independent and cross-referenced by Ukrainian Defense Reporting put Russian losses at approximately 900 soldiers in a single 24-hour period. Using the 70-80% drone casualty figure, that means somewhere between 630 and 720 of those casualties were drone-inflicted in 24 hours. Russia is hemorrhaging manpower at a rate it cannot mathematically sustain given current recruitment numbers, even with the mass mobilization programs Putin has deployed. And every soldier who surrenders rather than dies is one Russia doesn't even get to count as a battlefield casualty. They become a liability, a hostage, a bargaining chip in Ukrainian hands. This is where it gets critical. Ukraine figured out something Russia has not. Drones don't just kill. When wielded correctly, they negotiate. Section 3. How the mechanics actually work. Let's get specific, because the details here are what make this genuinely new territory in military history. Traditional combat drones, the kind most people picture, are flying bombs, fire and forget. There's no conversation, no process. You either survive the strike or you don't. Ukraine's drone units have developed something different, a multi-phase capture sequence that no military in the world has deployed at this scale before. Phase 1 is surveillance. A drone identifies a position, a soldier, or a group. It doesn't immediately strike. It watches. This alone is psychologically devastating for Russian troops, never knowing if the buzzing they hear overhead is the last sound they'll ever hear or whether they're being observed and given an opportunity to act. Phase 2 is the warning. United 24 media documented a specific incident in February where a Ukrainian drone equipped with a loudspeaker broadcast a message directly to Russian soldiers sheltering in the North Slobozansky direction. The message was precise. We know exactly where you are. Your shelter will be destroyed in 1 hour. All your companions from yesterday are already dead in the fields. Surrender now and return to your families. That's not generic propaganda. That's targeted psychological pressure delivered by the same platform that could kill them on command. The result? 5 Russian soldiers followed that drone to a surrender point. Phase 3 is the escort. The drone physically guides surrendering soldiers, walking them toward a location where Ukrainian forces can process them. The drone can't apply zip ties. It can't handcuff anyone, but it doesn't need to. It needs only to remain overhead, visible and armed, while the soldier walks exactly where he's told. On January 27th, United 24 media reported a landmark incident. A Ukrainian AI-assisted ground robot, the droid TW7.62, built by the defense company DevDroid, captured 3 Russian soldiers during a combat operation. The 3rd separate assault brigade confirmed no Ukrainian soldiers were present at the moment of capture. The robot did it alone. The brigade's own words were blunt. Without risk to our fighters, the mission was completed remotely. Think about what that sentence means for the future of this conflict. By the way, if you're finding this breakdown valuable, subscribe to War News. We cover these developments every single day, and you won't find analysis like this anywhere else. Here's where it gets darker. Section 4, the trap that closes from both sides. A Russian soldier who decides to surrender has not escaped danger. He has traded one kind for another. Putin's government has been explicit about how it views voluntary surrender, not as a human response to an impossible situation, as a crime. In December 2024, Ukrinform reported that Russian military commanders were issuing written instructions to troops. If capture is imminent, soldiers were expected to take their own lives rather than be taken prisoner. This is documented. This is official Russian military doctrine under Putin's war. Your value to the Kremlin ends the moment you stop being a weapon pointed at Ukraine. And for those who don't follow those instructions, on April 15, 2025, the Moscow Times reported the first officially documented case of a Russian soldier sentenced for voluntary surrender. Junior Sergeant Roman Ivanishin was stripped of his rank and handed a 15-year prison term for surrendering to Ukraine. Under Article 105 of Russia's Criminal Code, the statute governing murder, the maximum sentence without aggravating circumstances is also 15 years. Russia has formally decided that choosing to live instead of die in Ukraine is equivalent to killing someone. Let that land for a second. But the prison sentence isn't even the worst outcome, because Russia doesn't only punish surrendering soldiers after the fact, it kills them in the act. In July 2024, Militarny reported on footage captured by a Ukrainian drone. Overhead at the moment, a Russian soldier attempted to surrender. The footage showed a second Russian soldier shoot his surrendering comrade once at range, then walk up and deliver a finishing shot to the head. The drone watched all of it. The imagery is too graphic to show here. In October 2025, TVP World reported another documented case. A Russian soldier had barely begun laying down his weapons when a Russian FPV drone dropped an explosive device next to him. He died before he could take a single step toward Ukrainian lines. In February 2026, United 24 media documented a third case in the Chasiv Yar region. 2 Russian soldiers, already in the process of being guided to surrender by Ukrainian drones from the 24th 4th Separate Mechanized Brigade were struck by a Russian drone mid-escort, both killed. 3 separate incidents, 3 different timelines. One consistent conclusion: Russia is actively hunting its own soldiers to prevent them from reaching Ukrainian custody. The Ukrainian ground forces statement after the Chasiv Yar killing was brief but pointed. This is yet another evidence that the enemy does not value the lives of even its own soldiers. Section 5. What the numbers tell us about Putin's army. On December 31st, United 24 media reported that Ukraine had taken more than 10,000 Russian soldiers prisoner since the full-scale invasion began. That number has continued to climb through the winter. 10,000 sounds modest against an estimated 700,000 Russian troops deployed across Ukraine. But context matters. Every one of those 10,000 soldiers made a decision, often under immediate lethal threat from their own side, to surrender anyway. They chose Ukrainian captivity over Russian loyalty. And they made that choice knowing the prison sentence waiting for them if they ever return. Knowing their commanders might shoot them before they reach Ukrainian lines. Knowing the drone overhead might be Russian, not Ukrainian. They surrendered anyway. That tells you something about the conditions inside Putin's military that no official casualty report can capture. Morale isn't just low. In specific units, in specific sectors, it has completely collapsed. According to analysis from the Royal United Services Institute, Russia's force generation model, relying on mobilized reservists, prison recruits, and contracted fighters with minimal training, produces soldiers with low unit cohesion and high susceptibility to psychological pressure. They don't have the ideological commitment that makes troops fight through impossible conditions. Many of them were given almost no choice about being there. When a drone appears overhead and offers a way out, the offer finds fertile ground. Ukraine has built a system that exploits exactly this weakness at scale, with minimal risk to its own personnel, and with a downstream benefit of providing the prisoners needed for exchange negotiations. There are 3 things that make this sustainable going into 2026. First, Ukraine's drone manufacturing capacity has expanded dramatically. The country is now producing tens of thousands of FPV drones per month, according to data reported by Defense Express. Second, the psychological reputation of Ukrainian drones is self-reinforcing. The more soldiers who witness drone strikes, the more the sight of one overhead triggers immediate capitulation. Third, Russia has no effective counter doctrine. Shooting surrendering soldiers creates more surrenders, not fewer, because it confirms to every other soldier that the only sane option is to surrender before your own commander has the chance to eliminate you. This is a feedback loop Putin built himself, and it is accelerating. Section 6. What comes next? So what does this mean for the trajectory of this conflict? In the next 60 to 90 days, watch for 2 things. First, the prisoner exchange cadence. Both sides have shown willingness to execute large-scale swaps. The 500 for 500 transfer in early March 2026 confirms this channel remains open. As Ukraine's drone capture program matures, its bargaining position in these negotiations strengthens. More Russian prisoners means more Ukrainian soldiers freed from Russian captivity, including soldiers who were being held in documented torture conditions. Second, watch Russia's internal response to the surrender problem. The 15-year sentence handed to Roman Ivanishin was a signal, an attempt to use fear of post-war punishment to discourage surrender. But legal deterrence doesn't work on a battlefield where the alternative is immediate death. Putin's military leadership knows this. The question is, what escalation comes next? More aggressive use of blocking units, the barrier troops positioned behind Russian lines to shoot retreating soldiers, is the most likely response based on historical precedent from Russia's own doctrine during World War II under Order 227. If that happens, it won't stop the surrenders. It will just make the kill zone larger. Here's what this all means at the strategic level, and it connects directly back to what we started with. Ukraine has turned the fear of its own weapons into a recruitment tool for prisoner exchanges. The drone that makes a Russian soldier surrender is the same category of drone that killed his comrades. And by surviving and entering Ukrainian custody, that soldier becomes the mechanism by which a Ukrainian soldier held somewhere in Russia, in conditions the Red Cross has documented as violating every international standard, comes home. The drone doesn't just win the firefight, it wins the negotiation that comes after. That's not a battlefield tactic. That's a strategic architecture. And it's one Russia has no clean answer to. Conclusion. Here's the bottom line. Ukraine's drone program has evolved past simple kill metrics. The 70 to 80% casualty contribution is already a staggering figure, but the surrender pipeline, low-risk capture, prisoner exchange, Ukrainian soldiers returning home adds a second layer of strategic value that compounds over time. Russia's response, criminalizing surrender, killing soldiers who attempt it, issuing suicide instructions, has not stopped the surrenders. It has accelerated the collapse of trust within its own military structure. Soldiers at the front are now navigating a situation where dying by Ukrainian drone, dying by Russian drone, dying by their own commander's rifle, or surviving 15 years in a Russian prison are the only visible outcomes. Some of them are choosing the fifth option: walk toward the drone and raise your hands. In the coming weeks, watch for the next prisoner swap announcement. If Ukraine's winter totals hold and production rates continue, the exchange fund Fedorov mentioned is getting larger, and the soldiers Ukraine brings home will include some who've been held in brutal conditions for years. If you want to understand how Russia's manpower crisis is driving these decisions at the command level, and what the actual casualty numbers look like when you cut through the propaganda on both sides, our next video breaks down exactly that. The figures coming out of Mediazona and independent Russian demographic data tell a story the Kremlin is desperate to suppress. Subscribe to War News. We track every development in this conflict, without spin, without filler, and without pulling the analysis that makes this war make sense.